For this set of notes, we're going to be talking about the misconceptions, these common misconceptions, or these false ideas about the theory of evolution and what claims it makes and what claims it doesn't make. So, a little bit of writing here. I'm not going to be writing much, but I think this is really important to get out of the way because I think a lot of the reason that evolution is doubted in the United States in particular is because people often believe that evolution is making claims that it simply is not. So I think this is a really important way to start our unit. Our first misconception here is that evolution explains the origin of life. Um, and the truth is that's not something evolution even touches. The theory of evolution makes no claims at all about how life started on Earth. There's different scientific hypotheses, like RNA world is one. The first animals were bacteria is another hypothesis. But we don't have any evidence, so we can't test these claims as of yet. They're just hypotheses. Instead, the theory of evolution looks at once life exists, however that did happen, how does that life change over time? And we know life changes over time. That part is a fact. So then we look at, well, what forces can cause life to change over time? How do new species arise? Why do populations look different now than they did in the past? So evolution makes no claim about how life started on Earth. It just says, once we have life, how does that life change? Our second misconception is that evolution is just a theory. And this leads to this idea between the difference in how we use the word theory and when we're just kind of talking in everyday life and what a theory means in science language. Because in everyday life, I might say I have a theory, and then I'll list something that's really just an idea I have in my head that's never been tested. It just might sound plausible. That's a hypothesis in science. So a theory in science is an idea that's been tested hundreds or thousands of times in dozens or hundreds of different ways. And this idea's never been proven false. So in reality, a theory is the most certain about an idea we can ever be in science. Science doesn't deal in proofs. Science tries to disprove. So gravity is also a theory, but we would never say gravity is just a theory, and I don't think anyone would doubt that gravity's real or be confident enough to jump out of an airplane without a parachute because gravity is a theory. If you let go of a pin, it's going to fall. That's a test we've done on gravity millions of times, billions of times, and it always holds true. But despite all this evidence, gravity is a theory. It's the theory of gravity. Evolution is a theory because it has been tested millions of times over hundreds of years, and there's never been a scientifically valid test that has disproved evolution. So evolution is a theory, which means this is as confident about any idea that we can possibly be that it is true. Our next common misconception is that evolution is random, and there's no way to predict what changes might occur or we have no idea what traits are successful. And the truth is that the mutation in our DNA that causes new changes to appear are random, right? If bears make their way up north and they now live in icy environments that are white, a bear cannot choose to have white fur. A mutation that causes white fur is random. But once that mutation occurs and that trait is in the population, it's no longer random. A white-furred bear will do better in an icy environment because it can blend in and hide better from its prey. There's also mutations that cause white fur for black bears that live in forests, but they get selected out because they don't camouflage anymore and the prey can spot them more easily. If you want to know more about these bears, they're called spirit bears. You can look into this. There really are black bears born with white fur. That trait just doesn't spread throughout populations because it's not an advantageous trait in a forest the way that it is on ice. So the mutation is random, but the traits that are more successful are not. Another example is that sharks, which is a fish, and dolphins, which are a mammal, have astonishingly similar body forms, even though their ancestors clearly had different body forms. Dolphins' ancestors were land-dwelling mammals, but both that body shape is always successful for a predator in the ocean. So any mutation that causes that body trait to arise or even partially arise will help them catch more prey. They're more likely to survive and reproduce, and their offspring will have similar shapes. So the end result is not random, the mutation is random. Our next misconception is that evolution always makes organisms better, or it always leads to better adapted organisms. And the truth is that evolution is just a change in the allele frequency. So if in a human population, 50% of the people have an allele for blue eyes, and 2 generations later, 40% of the people have an allele for blue eyes, evolution has occurred. That allele frequency has changed. It's also possible for harmful traits to appear and spread in a population. An example is sickle cell anemia. This is a incomplete dominant trait. So if you have one copy of sickle cell anemia, if you're heterozygous for sickle cell anemia, your body is changed slightly. Your blood cells are changed slightly. Not enough to become fatal, but your blood cells are different. But this heterozygous form actually protects people from malaria. Malaria is a disease that humans can get from mosquitoes that can cause horrible fevers. It's the #1 cause of death in humans over our existence. It's really bad. So if you have one dominant allele, let me write something really quick. So if you have one trait for sickle cell anemia and then one for not sickle cell anemia, you have protection from malaria. If you have 2 traits for sickle cell anemia, you're homozygous for sickle cell anemia, you will die, most likely. It's a really serious disease that will almost certainly cause you to die. But because in the heterozygous form it offers us protection from malaria, in areas with really horrific mosquito problems and lots of malaria, the trait for sickle cell anemia has spread throughout populations despite the homozygous form causing death. So here's an example of a trait that is being spread through a population evolutionarily, but it can lead to death. So evolution does not always make organisms better. Our next misconception is that evolution is always a slow process. And the truth is it often is. So often it is a very slow process where changes are tiny and they accumulate over long periods of time. But through mutation, a super beneficial trait can appear, and it can spread unbelievably rapidly through the population. And a real example of this was in a study of bacteria growing on agar. And they had some sugar that these bacteria could feed on. And in the agar, there's citrate. And bacteria can't feed on citrate. So their food was limited to the sugar that was on the plate that they were growing on. And after a few thousand generations or thousands of generations, since they have multiple generations within a day for bacteria, one group learned to eat citrate. They had a mutation in their cells that allowed bacteria to feed on this citrate as an energy source. And within a day, that population had completely taken over all of the other bacteria because they had way more food available to them. So often it's slow, but if the mutation or the new trait is rapidly beneficial, it will spread very, very rapidly. And our final misconception is that humans evolved from monkeys. I hear this all the time, and no, it's not true. And the truth is that no modern animals evolved from any other modern animal. They're all modern. They can't be someone else's ancestor. That'd be like saying that you are the ancestor to your cousin. That can't be true because your cousins and you have the same ancestor. So humans did not evolve from monkeys. But if you go further enough back, humans and monkeys would have a common ancestor. Gorillas and monkeys would have a common ancestor. You just have to go millions of years back in time for that ancestor to have been alive. And one of the frustrating things about evolution is often we don't know what that ancestor was. We can sometimes find bones. So we can find bones from millions of years ago of apes that walked on two legs, and there's dozens of different species of them. And there's no real definitive way to say, well, this one was an ancestor of humans, but this one wasn't. That becomes guesswork. But evolution doesn't say that we evolved from monkeys. It doesn't say that we evolved from chimps. It says that we shared a common ancestor with chimps that lived millions of years ago. Or we shared a common ancestor with monkeys that lived dozens of millions of years ago. And the more genetically different any two organisms are, the further ago their common ancestor would have lived. So if anyone ever makes the claim that humans evolved from monkeys, that is not a claim that is ever made in evolutionary science. They might say that humans and monkeys had a common ancestor that is no longer alive. So that's going to do it for our misconceptions. Hopefully this cleared some stuff up for you and will allow you to further enjoy learning about the way that organisms change over time. Thanks for watching.